Hello, 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 and welcome to Old Women Who Write. I'm Jean Palin, and I am beyond happy to have with me today um, a woman of a certain age, a woman of age, a woman of thought, a woman of dignity, a woman of anger, all of those people, a woman of humor, a woman of excellent writing. All of those things are Jane Campbell, and she is here with us from Bermuda. Am I right?
Yes, you are. I'm in Bermuda, Jean.
Madly jealous. From Bermuda. And Jane has just recently gotten published her first book called Cat Brushing. That every time I tell my friends about your book, they say, Cat brushing? What is that? So then I have to tell them some of the story, the name story of cat brushing. Um, she wrote, this is her debut book at age 80. I cannot tell you how it lifted my heart, Jane, to see a book
I'm,
published by an 80-year-old. I am just completed a memoir, which is in the process of being published. And as far as I was concerned, there was no audience out there, but you have broken that barrier. So I
well,
am so grateful to you.
well, Jean, it's lovely to be here. Absolutely lovely. To be honest, I was astonished that the book was published myself. It began, I should say, it's a collection of short stories. It began with one story that I was very lucky with. I can tell you the little story of that story if you want.
Sure.
And well, I wrote it. I was in Bermuda staying with my eldest son. I have 4 children who live here. It's another reason I come here for the winters. And I was staying there, and he had a cat called Lucy. There are two Siamese cats, Sarah and Lucy. And I was brushing Lucy, and he was out at work, and my lovely, lovely daughter-in-law was at home in Canada. And this story began to emerge in my head of an old woman. And I wrote it, and I called it Cat Brushing, although actually, as you will see if you read the story, cat brushing is a metaphor for other things.
Yes.
And I sent it to the London Review of Books, of which I'm an enormous fan. And amazingly, they published it, and I was introduced to an agent. And she said, Jane, I think you write quite well about old women. Will you write some more stories? And that's the story of cat brushing.
Wow, that's quite wonderful. For those who are watching, listening, you may wonder why I emphasized age. Of course, first of all, it's just a miracle to get published at 80. That's a given. But even more importantly is that the book is about being old. The
Yes,
book is about being female and old, more
yes,
specifically. And
yes.
that matters because there's nothing out there. There is nothing out there reflecting what our experience is of age. And although we were born on different continents and live in different places, I suspect, or I see through reading your book, that our experiences are similar to each
Well,
other.
that I love to hear. I love to hear. Many of my heroines are nameless, and because I want them to be every old woman.
Yes, I get that. In the book, there are 13 old women
Yeah,
who speak to us. They are
yeah.
13. Each one of them is a different woman. The commonality is their
Yes,
age and gender.
yes. And very often, well, actually, no, I'll stick with that, age and gender, and the emotions they carry within them on
Yes.
that account.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely. I want to tell you that I read every review out there. You got sparkling reviews
Thank
for
you.
cat brushing. And I read every review. And every once in a while, when I was reading a review, I thought, the reviewer doesn't quite know what to make of this.
Oh, I agree.
They
I
just
agree.
quite don't. So they're saying, well, this is an angry old woman, or sometimes angry, sometimes funny, but they don't get it.
No.
That was the feeling. Did you feel that?
Well, I did. I'm not sure I've read all the reviews, and because I'm really UK based, so I have a UK publisher as well. So I've read their reviews, which are often actually less interesting than the US ones. Um, I um, I have found many people struggle. So, some people, I was interviewed, oh God, I was asked by a ghastly UK publication who will be nameless to do an interview on being old and the menopause and sex. And I thought, you just missed the point. You just missed the point. It's actually not about sex. It's about the appetite for life, which
Yes.
can be found in many different places,
Yes.
including brushing cats. It's an appetite for life, which is assumed not to belong to old women. People assume, usually men, of course, but even young women, they assume that it's gone out. The flame has gone out, that somehow you're just a little husk of what you once were. And that's what made me so furious. And that's one of the reasons I think I wrote the stories. And those reviews drive me mad.
Yes, I completely understand that. I mean, aside from age and female and age, the experience of sensuality, sexuality is so off limits for old women.
Yep.
Old women to experience or think about or talk about, and certainly to experience.
Yeah.
Just so what you've done is so bold. I just want to alert the reader. It's so wonderful, bold.
It always kind of terrifies me. I think, oh, surely not too bold, but
No,
lovely. Thank you.
wonderfully, just clear, just right there, not just there. I've just really loved it.
Funnily enough, I did find them very easy to write. And it made me realize that probably simmering away inside all through my 70s was this anger about the way old women are portrayed in the press, in media, in films very often, and so on. I mean, there are exceptions, but in general. And then it was during lockdown, which I'm sure you had in the US as we did in the UK. And there were all these pictures of little old women sitting by their firesides, looking quite content, and how lonely they would be. And I just thought, shit, you just haven't a clue.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. There's one quote that I pulled out, and it's from the chapter called 183 Minutes.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And to me, it really encapsulated, whatever, what you're saying. Can I read that little section to you?
Love you too. I like that story, yeah.
It says, and the fact, let me tell for the listener, it's two strangers meet on a train and have an instant connection right there. So, and the writer, the woman, is saying, and the fact that they understood each other was essential, for each had also become accustomed to the knowledge that as far as society, and in particular family, was concerned, their lives, their internal, intellectual, and emotional, and one could add psychological lives, were non-existent, as though with the advent of wrinkles and a certain uncertainty in their balance went an erasure of all thought, all significance, all hope, all ambition, and all passion. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you should maybe add it was a man and a woman.
Oh, yes. I didn't say that. Oh, yes.
Yeah, because she
Old
falls in
man and
she
old.
falls in love with, they're both old, and she falls in love with him.
Yes.
As one of my daughters-in-law said, there are not a lot of happy endings in these stories.
No, there aren't.
So you have to read it to see, but thank you. Actually, sometimes I surprise myself. Yeah, it does. That's beautifully picked out, Jean. How perceptive of you. It does summarize what I was trying to say about being old,
Yes. Yes.
And
I remember the day that I was dismissed as a thinking person.
Oh, yeah?
I was in my 70s, and I was an elected official in a small Florida city.
Yeah.
And I had been so for 5 years, going in on my 6th year. And the newly elected mayor was probably in his early 50s. And handsome Italian guy, right? And so I went in to see him to describe a plan I had come up for, which had to do with, I don't know, parking or transportation or something that I had come up with for our town. I went into a long explanation. I had drawings, I had et cetera. And this was in January, the month of January, which matters. And I finished, and he said, "That's great." He said, "Did you get to spend Christmas with your grandkids?"
Oh, God.
And that was it. That was the first time that I am old.
Yes,
I am
yes,
old in others' eyes,
yes,
penetrated, and
yes.
had a for a while, had a terrible effect.
Okay,
A terrible, it affected me.
yes.
Um,
That's awful.
yeah, but it's common. It
It
is.
is common. And I think, you see, the thing is, one day, Jean, I'd love to know more about your background and so on. But my background, my immediate response would have been fury.
Yes.
Fury and rage and absolute outrage, and probably I would have done something incredibly unpolitical and probably unwise, because I often do put my foot in it, but I just find it intolerable. I will not be patronized.
Yes.
So, but I'm sorry that happened to you, but you fought back.
What is
Fought
interesting
back.
is, oh yeah, what is interesting is that in any other situation, I would have clapped back, just
Yeah. But
bam.
he
But
just got,
this one
yeah.
just penetrated. The spear went in, and it
And
took
he,
me. I could not respond in the way I would normally respond.
so, well, that's actually a beautiful, beautiful, it's a beautiful story about why old women need to be, I don't know, have a certain solidarity. So we know, and we can be prepared.
Now you know why I began Old Women Who Write.
Now I do, yes.
Exactly for that reason.
Yeah.
Um, the we could talk about society all day. Let's go back to your book. Your book is not a happy book. Um,
No, no, it does not have many happy endings, and it's not meant to.
mhm.
What you mean? You want me to say more about that?
Yeah,
I suppose because, well, I'm not a believer in happiness. I value contentment. I think, contentment should be looked for. Happiness you stumble upon now and again in your life, and you're very grateful. But a search for happiness. I know this goes against the American Constitution, doesn't it? But the pursuit of
the
happiness.
pursuit of.
The
It didn't
pursuit
say
of
you
happiness.
get it.
No, but the pursuit of happiness, I regard, from a philosophical point of view, as a waste of time. But what I do think matters is something about real experience, and sort of cutting through the crap and getting to something authentic. And this may matter, this may be relevant. I only mention it because it might be. So for 35 years of my professional life, I worked as a group analyst, which basically is psychoanalytic theory applied to groups. And I could I could talk about that for ages when I won't. But it means that I always look at human beings as people shaped by the groups that they grew up in and the groups that they belong to, and so on and so forth. I'm sure lots of us do this. And the truth is that life is not always happy. Life is tough. Life is hard. People have to struggle. Bad things happen to good people, all this kind of stuff. Sometimes good things happen to bad people, which is really unfair. Life is tough. It's not a bed of roses. And I suppose that in the reality and the authenticity, as I hoped I was presenting these old women, I wanted to touch on something of that. I did not want a rose-colored picture, partly because I just think it's untrue.
I see. The very last story in the book, I think it's called Loneliness. Is
No,
that
it's on being alone,
I'm
on
being
being
alone,
alone.
I'm being alone.
Yes,
The very last story was the most hopeful
yes, it
story
was.
in the book.
Yes, yes, it
Um,
was. But it was a story of massive compromise. Yes, do you want me to say? Well, that story, you're a very, very good reader, that story is probably the most autobiographical. By the way, these stories are really all fiction. No one should think they are drawn from my life. They're drawn from, and sometimes people I've worked with and so on. But the settings are extremely real. Most of the settings I've grown up in, they are part of my life. And On Being Alone does begin in colonial Africa, which is where I grew up. And and it's about the journey of a woman from believing that she is destined to be alone all her life, and that it's a position of power and strength. I mean, it's not, you have to sort of see this in the story. And then she realizes late in life, almost by chance, you will notice she doesn't do anything like fall in love. She doesn't meet a magic person. She doesn't think, oh my God, this is the one. She sort of stumbles into a situation where she finds she's not alone anymore. And she suddenly realizes that she's actually never been alone because she's never known what it is to love someone. That's a sort of summary.
Yes.
And she does end up there. She does end up. Yes, yes.
I thought about that chapter and, well, several others. Probably 40 years ago, I was on a cruise ship.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of the pieces of entertainment on the cruise ship was a psychic who held a midnight seance.
Oh, wow.
So I'm a sucker for those.
Oh,
So
I'd have been there.
yeah, I was there. I was there. And he was walking around the room. All the lights were out. And he would touch someone on the shoulder and then say something like, I don't know, the keys are in the closet, or, you know, whatever, or someone named E is trying to get through to you, or whatever it was. And he passed by me and tapped me on the shoulder and he said, you know, you're going to live a very long life, right? And I said, I kind of do know that. And he said, I'm warning you, you must take care of yourself. Well, I came out of there thinking, well, that's stupid. If I'm going to live a very long life, why do I have to take care of myself? And I lived much of my life with that notion. Why do I need to take care of myself? I'm going to live anyway.
Actually, you look like a risk taker.
Well, until I started aging and getting complaints, you know, COPD, and was in and out of the hospitals and those kinds of things, and realized, oh, of course, he didn't just, and I found myself alone, which I hadn't planned to be, you know, but living alone for 40 years, not what I planned, but I finally, like this moment of clarity said, oh, he meant much more than take care of yourself, you know, take care of your health. He meant much more. And I had never given the kind of thought that you're reflecting, the kind of insights you're reflecting are just brand new to me, really. I mean, I feel like the late developer. Yeah. Your last story did give a ray of hope for connection.
Yes, it did.
Valid connection.
It did. Yes, you're absolutely right. Which is what I think the search of life is for.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I won't call it happiness. I think it's connection. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I want you to, oh, this time is going so fast. I wonder how, well, I want you to read. It's always difficult for a person who writes fiction to read, who writes longer stories or whole novels, for instance, to read, because there's a, as you saw, we talked early this morning by email about starting place, stopping place for your reading, but I would like the listeners to get a flavor of what you've read. So we talked, and you're going to read a piece from the chapter entitled Kindness.
The short story called Kindness, yes.
Yes.
And any reader of this story needs to be able to cope with irony, I have to say. Just let's put it out there. You'll see why when
Yes.
you see. So I will read it. I don't do this often, Jean, so shout at me if you can't hear or something.
Okay.
Right. Kindness. It has been my experience that people are only called manipulative if their manipulations fail. If they are successful, people scarcely notice the manipulation. In my case, I believe I have a useful capacity for ruthlessness, and therefore, more often than not, I am successful. The kind, the scrupulous, the uneasy are seen as manipulative when their small dreams are crushed back into the dust from which they arose. However, I can be kind when needed. Let me give you an example. Once upon a time, there was a little seaside town on the west coast of England. You will see later why I need to keep this anonymous, which had become an informal refuge for a well-heeled retirement community. Every day, the sands are filled with elderly folk like me in their barbers and wellies walking their dogs. I am far too selfish to own a dog, but I like to walk, and I know it's good for me. So I too walk a couple of miles every morning across the wave-contoured sands, through the many small puddles of seawater left behind by the retreating tide, and I see there on the damp sand are many and various footprints. Variety they may be, but mine are indistinguishable from the rest. And this observation leads, as walks beside the sea so often do, to philosophical musings on whether I truly am different from these ghastly people, or if I really am as stupid and unattractive as they. Almost every morning I will spot Leo, a remarkably and unjustly tall, fit, handsome, 78-year-old retired surgeon who will be dragging along behind him his sinister and unlovely mongrel, a rescue dog from Romania called, without irony, Brutus. I say unjustly, since when his fairy godmothers gifted him brains and looks and health, and as it happens, wealth, they also made him an absolute shit. His wife, Mattie, is small, fat, and stupid. One of those aging blondes whose looks call out for the adjective vacuous. Naturally, it is obvious to all that Mattie is daily the victim of this narcissist's venom. But she is so small and stupid and fat that sometimes I hardly blame him. However, one day I was walking past their house when I heard sobs. Now, Mattie is manipulative, no doubt about it. But being married to Leo and being daft and stupid, she's therefore vulnerable, so she has no other choice. Mattie is so manipulative, everyone says, Leo too. Fearing the worst, but as inquisitive as ever, I walked around the side of the garage through the garden gate, which I knew well, as did all of us, and into the back garden where Mattie sat, bruised as usual, but this time also holding a badly bleeding arm. The ghastly dog Brutus had bitten her. Where is he? I asked anxiously, for I do not only dislike dogs, but quite sensibly I fear them, particularly dogs like Brutus, for he is the size of a Great Dane and hideously coated in multifariously colored mongrel fur with shifty criminal eyes that might be able to see me for what I am, and I am sure a puppyhood that would predispose any dog to violence. Through dramatic sobs, Mattie said, Leo is walking him. But have you had a tetanus shot? Shouldn't he be put down? Isn't it against the law to keep a dog who bites people? As you can tell, this is not my subject. Sob, sob. Leo would never hear of that. I wanted a small dog. There was a dear little dachshund on the website, but Leo refused. He said he could not take it for walks. I smiled at the thought of handsome 6-foot-something Leo out on the sands with a little wriggling sausage dog. His image would indeed be severely damaged. Would that could happen. What do you want me to do? I asked. Get rid of Brutus? I can get rid of Leo too. If I had a book of spells to hand, I would just wave my wand and eliminate them both. You might wonder about this suggestion, but Leo was a typical consultant surgeon, and everyone knows that all surgeons are psychopaths, not just in the operating theatre, although for all I know that is true too. It was common knowledge that he had used his looks and charm to, how to put it delicately, feel up, grope, touch up every woman within 5 miles, and he had managed, as they say, to put it about with abandon. He had even had a few goes at me. I'm no looker, but I know how to talk to men. I'm about his age, which puts me in the category of past it elderly woman, but I am unafraid of them. And when these old men see that, they take it as a challenge. It is their wish that I too should kneel to them. Metaphorically, I hasten to add. I really don't think this is a sexual fantasy. But they want me to worship them, to listen to them, to agree that they are right. They want to see that I acquiesce in their general intellectual and physical superiority. They want me to know my place. Provocatively for them, they can see I despise them, not least when they break down and start sobbing about their prostatectomies and how it has changed their well-endowed lives for the worse, and how at least it means you don't have to choose between a spit or a swallow. That last whispered hopefully. Mattie, I said, you would be happier without Leo in your life. She'll never leave me, she said pitifully, peering up at me through her tears. No, I said, I can see that he wouldn't. Mattie was God's gift to a sadist. And the worst thing is, we're going to a family wedding in France next week, and our dog sitter is unable to take Brutus. Now I understood. This is what this was about. She wanted me to say I would look after the dreadful dog. Have you asked Julia? Julia is the go-to ninny who can't say no. Every community has one. She's in hospital with a kidney infection. These are the sort of retirement home issues that plague our little haven by the sea. And then a plan began to form. I'll take Brutus, I said kindly.
Thank you. I purposely did not say to the watchers that this piece, I laughed out loud. This piece is wonderful. I hope the reader, there's quite a bit yet to go in the story. I hope they get the hint of the plan that is afoot.
I hope so too. I hope so too. There is a story by Guy de Maupassant called Un Vendetta, which I sort of vaguely remembered, and I kind of based the story on, and that might give you a hint, anyone who knows it, as to what's about to happen.
Right, right. Wow, it's quite wonderful. Do you have a copy of your book there you can hold up?
Yeah, this is the
advertising part. There it is, Cat Brushing by Jane Campbell. I want to tell you, every old woman out there, which is my main audience, every old woman out there, get this book for your friend, for yourself, and for your friend, old women, because they will thank you for it. It is a deep dive into where we are in this society.
thank you.
And I can't praise it highly enough. I didn't even mention that the writing is superb, but the listener, the watcher can hear that on hearing this story. Your use of words. I have to tell you, there were 2 words in your book, and I only wrote one down, that I had to look up the meaning.
Hey, wow.
I pride myself on knowing where I wrote it down. Where did I put it? Well, maybe I won't get to know.
I might be able to guess one because other people have asked me about
Okay,
it.
it starts with an N.
Noumenon.
Yes, Numenon. I had to look it up.
So don't be, I mean, actually, everyone has to look it up. Do you want me to say what it
For
is?
those who with me didn't know, it's sort of a thing as it is in itself.
Well, the thing is, it's in a story called Schopenhauer and I. And Schopenhauer followed Kant. I have to be careful. You have to be careful how you pronounce that, and that's part of the joke as well, of course. In developing ideas, there's a phenomenal world, which is the real world, which we see, in the noumenal world, which is the conceptual world. And noumenal was the term that Schopenhauer used, and that's why it's there. But practically everyone has to look it up.
I didn't know that. Thank you. Thank you. Well, this conversation just may give rise to other conversations. I feel it. I will tell you, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, two friends and I wrote two books about being over 50.
Right.
And the reason we wrote them at that time was because I went to a bookstore and I was looking on the shelves for books on being our age, postmenopausal, post-career, or moving into that period. And all I found were books on geriatrics,
Yeah, yeah.
the
That's
care
what
of
they
old
do.
people in nursing homes.
That's what they do. Yeah.
Right.
If you're in Britain, the NHS puts you into geriatric medicine at the age of 65.
Yes. So I got my two friends and I lined up a bunch of these horrible books on that I got from the library on my fireplace mantle and said, this is what the world thinks of us. We must write books about being over 50. So we did. We were way ahead of our time and nobody cared that we had written these
We're
books.
ahead of it. And I'm sorry, Jean, I never discovered you.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry too, but they love me too. But now here I am in the same place. The world has shifted, and now we're in a different phase. And yet again, we're not seen. We are not seen. We are not recognized for the full, entire human beings.
Yeah, as full, entire human beings. That's it. You put it in a nutshell.
So, thank you, my dear. This has
Thank
been
you, Jean.
quite lovely.
It has been wonderful.
Yes,
That's,
and I will be closer to where you are. I'm heading for Florida next week for 3 months because I want warm, as you do.
okay.
Yeah, so thank you. And again, everyone, buy cat brushing. You will not be sorry. You will so enjoy it. So thank you all from old women who write. Now I just have to figure out how I get out of here, which I always have trouble doing. Let me see. This is the place where I have to edit at the end because I never can find my way out.